What up, y'all? This is Adrian Younge, and you are tuned in to Artform Radio. I hope you are well wherever you may be in the world, whether you are in Rio, Tokyo, New York, Chicago, Sydney, Moscow, Paris, or here in Los Angeles with me on this beautiful day. As promised, today I am going to further break down to you my latest project entitled The American Negro. Released last week, and I can't tell you how good it feels to see that conversations on race, conversations on self, conversations on bigotry in general have been really getting deep around the world. I've been doing a massive amount of press, and the questions, the conversations, everything it's all what I really dreamed of in making this album. So I wanted to take this time to further elaborate on my message and answer a lot of questions that some of you have been asking. So here I want to start with the beginning. So first of all, the American Negro. What is it to me? To me, the American Negro is my What's Going On album. It's a professorial take on the systemic and malevolent psychology that afflicts people of color from pre-slavery to pre-equality. It's my black opera. It's me trying to make the world a better place through understanding and love. And before I even get into breaking down some of the text in here, I want to talk to you about a story. Something that happened with me yesterday. So while I was doing my press calls, I was interviewed by a German female journalist. And she started off the conversation by saying, "Hey, Adrian, I want to talk to you about the roller coaster ride that I had when I first listened to the album." And she said, "I hope I don't offend you." I said, "No, it's cool." She's a white German lady, by the way. She said that when she first turned on the album, she felt a certain kind of way. She felt stigmatized. She was turned off because she felt as though the words were not for her because she's not black and she's not marginalized. And I'm paraphrasing here, but she's not marginalized in the same way. And what happened is it sparked conversations amongst her friends, her close friends. And she learned a lot about herself by what her friends had to say. And then she went back and listened to the album and realized that the album wasn't just for people of a darker hue. And she apologized, and I said, no apologies needed. I said, I appreciate how vulnerable you are and your willingness to talk to me about this. And she was thanking me for making this album. But I said, you know what? I'm thanking you because I create to inspire. I create in hopes that it makes other people's lives better. And I don't just say that to say that. It's something I really mean. So I know many of you are probably dealing with some of the same things regarding the album, but I had to just bring that to light. Now, I want to get into Revisionist history. The album starts off with me saying the musician is the document, an oral transcription of experience and perception through the vantage point of self. So this whole introduction here that I'm speaking on the notion of double consciousness. That's why I'm bringing you into the American Negro. Double consciousness is image versus identity. It's the way that we look at ourselves in the mirror, us people of darker hue. Because when we look in the mirror, we see our own reflection. But we also see something else. We see ourselves through the optic created by white imperialism that's derivative from an old slaveocracy. We see ourselves as a caricature of who we are supposed to be. We see ourselves as the face of evil of the world because we are blamed for the ills, the wrongs of society. I see myself with these overdetermined stereotypes that view me as a barbarous or a creature. These inequitable characteristics whereby black is sullen and white is pure. So this is what I'm talking about. And when I say the musician is the document, it's my oral transcription. African culture is traditionally passed down orally. My oral, A-U-R-A-L, transcription is of my experience and perception through the vantage point of self. It's me documenting something on wax. It's me speaking through my ancestors because soul is what connects us to the past. So going into this even further, I say the minstrel dance took centuries to develop, but its creation exposes a prodigious clockwork behind racism and hate in Western society. The minstrel dance, look up minstrel dance. Look up what minstrel dance meant to Black Americans. This is a first form of real entertainment that we were allowed to do and make money in America. Blackface. That's us showing white people our culture, but us performing as caricatures of ourselves. So I say the minstrel dance took centuries to develop, but its creation exposes the prodigious clockwork behind racism and hate in Western society. Have we learned anything? Do we know who we are and where we belong? Does our skin reasonably elicit fear and negative judgment? Can we uniformly agree that my culture is far from uniform? If my blackness is a costume fabricated by stereotypes, what symbolizes my true identity? This is double consciousness, y'all. So I'm going to start off my set by playing the American Negro because it really epitomizes my vision. This is Artform Radio, and I'm breaking down the American Negro. I am an evolving term that we can't agree on. A multitude of colors some can't quite process. A porch monkey that arrived as a jungle bunny. A boy, even though I was never up picking it. I am the sound of America, the dissonance they created. I am a Black American, colored by America's ineptitude. I am an African American, struggling with my allegiance to the motherland. I am an evolving light, living under the shade of our ancestors. I am your American Negro.
Worry
matter the pejorative of choice, we are black. Unlike the tar they used on their faces to reinforce a stereotype, their stereos don't like. And I say this because I am of sound mind, and the sounds that reverberate in my mind are never confused by the volume of misinformation programming the minds of America. Black people, listen to your own music, as soul is the connection to our ancestors, a language of tonal tensions, teaching an audience it was never intended for. That's the American Negro, the song. Now, at the end, I say, black people, listen to your own music, as soul is the connection to our ancestors, a language of tonal tensions, teaching an audience it was never intended for. Now, when we were taken from the interior of Africa, when we were stolen from our native lands, we were brought to the coast, and we had no idea what was going to happen. This journey across the Saharan desert was called the Death March because people died being shackled. They died walking to the coast. These innocent people died not knowing their fate, not knowing what was coming next, not knowing what was happening to their children or their parents. And on the Death March, if someone couldn't make it, they would tie them on a tree and leave them there for death. And then when you got to the coast, you were put in cages. And then this is a lot of times these people in the interior of Africa, this is the first time in their life they ever saw the sea. So they're seeing the sea for the first time. And they're mesmerized by these big ships. They've never seen anything like this before. And I'm actually talking to you guys using a story that was documented from an enslaved person. It was the first time they ever saw the boat on the sea. So they come to the coast and they're very scared. But when they get there, they're mesmerized. And then they see people being forced into the ships. See people getting forced into a 3x6 box, small enclosure on the bottom of the ship. And this is hard for me, I'm sorry, y'all. Their exuberance at seeing something for the first time turns into terror. And they realize their fate. So what happened here at this time in Africa is something called the victim kinship, where you have these rival tribes from all parts of Africa being taken to the coast. And as soon as they get on that ship, all of their hatred towards each other, all their problems are now alleviated because they become one with the task of survival, posterity. This is when black people started calling themselves brother and sister. It's on these ships. This is where victim kinship developed. Now, if I'm walking down Figueroa Street here in front of my record store, if I'm on the sidewalk and I see any black person, there is an unwritten rule that we have to say hi to each other. There's an unwritten rule that we have to acknowledge each other. And if that doesn't happen, I look at them as if they're weird or strange because of victim kinship. So when I say that Black people listen to your own music as soul is the connection to our ancestors, a language of tonal tensions, teaching an audience it was never intended for. Soul is something that is the nucleus of our consciousness. And we speak through our ancestors because we're born with soul. This soul was meant for us. It was meant to teach us about posterity. It was meant to teach us about our kinship as victims turned into survivors. This is the American Negro, y'all. Next song I'm going to get into is a song entitled Watch the Children. Going to Dying on the Run. I'll talk about both these after. We can live this way. Children of today. Living by the gun. Dying on the run. Hear me when I say What up, y'all? This is Adrian Younge, and you are listening to Artform Radio, and I'm breaking down the American Negro. So I just played two songs for you, Watch the Children and Dying on the Run. In Watch the Children, the lyrics are, people watch the children loving everyone under the sun. Now, this connects to the American Negro because I'm saying, sun burns in the shade, my melanin feels the light. Don't worry about radiation. Our people gonna be all right. This goes back to the concept of victim kinship. And Watch the Children, to me, was inspired by a viral video I saw of a young white kid. Looked like he was like maybe 3 years old. And a young black kid. It looks like they haven't seen each other in a very long time. In baby years, that's usually like a month. But they haven't seen each other, and they ran to each other and gave themselves a big hug. And it took me back to my childhood because when I was young, I lived in a place called Canton, New York, upstate New York, and I was there 1st through 3rd grade. I was the only black kid in that area. I mean, there was Amish people that lived in that area, and I was there because my father was in the military. So I saw racism, but I didn't fully realize it until one day I was on a bus, school bus, going on a field trip. And I remember a little white kid with freckles and red hair called me a nigger. I remember that specifically. I'll never forget that. It was the first time I was ever called to my face a nigger. This is when I was in about 2nd grade. And I think about the innocence of humanity, how racism is a learned behavior. It's not natural because race is a social construct. And I think about me being a kid and playing soccer, which many of you call football, which is the proper term, with a bunch of white kids, and they looked at me as equal, and I looked at them as equal. And I remember that moment where I had to question who I was. Most people aren't racist. And when people watch the children loving everyone under the sun, they get back to that primordial love. And that's what humanity is. And with Dying on the Run, I said, we can't live this way, children of today, living by the gun, dying on the run. Hear me when I say we can't live this way, children of today. These children are older. And these children are shooting each other. I'm talking about the teenagers in Chicago. I cannot believe, it's hard for me to fathom how blacks are killing blacks like this. First of all, just how people can murder people like that, but how blacks are killing blacks, especially when we're dealing with all this oppression we have to deal with ourselves. Dying on the Run is Chicago. Dying on the Run is the favelas in Brazil. Dying on the run is our inability to hold hands and love each other. In Chicago this year, 81 people have been murdered. 7 more than last year. I'm talking about black people. And most of these murders is by gun violence. So that's why I wrote that song. The next song I'm going to play for you is called James Mincy Jr. does my skin define me? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through some of the lyrics here because I know some of you, where English is not your first language, have difficulty understanding what's going on. So here, this is Lauren Oden singing this song. I wrote this song with him. It says, can you please tell me how to ease the pain? Sick of brothers dying, policemen lying, children in the streets, another son is gone. It's so sad to see that you don't see yourself in me. Now, this is the hook. Please let me breathe. I can't breathe. A cry from my soul. Please let me breathe. I can't breathe. A cry from my soul. Why should my skin bring so much pain? Second verse. Can you please tell mama Junior's gone on home? Remember I said that. Can you please tell mama Junior's gone on home? Tell my baby I love him. Daddy needs you to be strong. It's so sad to see that you don't see yourself in me. Why does my skin define me? This song is entitled James Mincy Jr. And it was written and sung by his nephew, James Mincy Jr.'s nephew. James Mincy Jr. died in 1982, murdered by the police using a chokehold. He died by asphyxiation. Now, Lauren Oden is his nephew, and Lauren Oden, as you know, I work with him extensively, and he's one of my dear friends that I've known since childhood. And when he told me this story, it really hit me because I never really understood the magnitude, the impact his death had on his family. His family, his parents, his uncles, his aunts, those are essentially my blood relatives. That's how close we are. And we wrote this song to shed light on those that have died from asphyxiation before Eric Gardner, before George Floyd, our forgotten heroes. He was murdered because he was pulled over by the cops. And they say that he was restraining arrest. He was pulled over because he had a cracked windshield. When they initially turned on their sirens, he didn't want to immediately pull over because he felt scared. And if you were raised in South Central Los Angeles, you may identify with the fear. He drove to somewhere he was familiar. That's where his mom lived. He pulled over, got out the car, and they tackled him with a chokehold. They said that he was high on PCP and that he had superhuman strength. If you can, go to YouTube and type in James Mincy Jr. and look at the ABC special that they made on him. And you'll see the racist cop depicting the incident with a smile. They said he was on PCP, but there was no PCP found in his system. That's how he justified the use of the chokehold, because this black creature was too strong. He was choked out in front of his mother. His mother's pleading for the police to stop. But our value as black people is subjugated. James Mincy Jr.'s death was the 16th in over 7 years that was attributed to the police using the chokehold in Los Angeles. These were the tensions that were brewing 10 years before the 92 riots with Rodney King. Now, I close on James Mincy Jr. with the question, and I'd love for you to answer this question for me by sending me a message on social media. If the 16 victims that were killed in Los Angeles with the chokehold over 7 years by police were white, because they were all black, if they were white, how long would it have taken for our county to issue a moratorium against the use of the deadly chokehold? Next, I want to play for you Mama, You Will Make It. That was a song I wrote in response to James Mincy Jr.'s death and all of the other mothers that saw their children die at the hands of police brutality. In writing this album, it also opened me up to new discussions with my family, with my kids, and with my mother. My mother said to me something she never said to me before. She said, you know, Adrian, when you were a teenager, every single time you would leave the house, I was scared. I said, why, Mom? Like, I was a good kid. I had good grades. I never got into trouble. I don't understand. She said, I was always afraid that you, as a black young man, could be killed because you are young and black. And I was so perplexed. And I thought back to the times when I left and said, I love you, Mom. I'll see you at curfew. And I remember she always kind of tripped like, yo, man, you're going to be here on time. And I remember that. But I didn't know that her concern was so loaded at the time. And I look at the black mother as the disadvantaged without a title. On the album, I have a segment called Disadvantaged Without a Title, and I'm going to read that to you. It says, as the lighter hue struggles for the best tan, those of a darker complexion spend billions of dollars on skin bleaching cream. Essentially, there is an untold amount of irreparable damage that white imperialism has made against the confidence of people of color. A vast enigma that reaffirms the notion that skin color indicates or prescribes one's human value. A value cut in half if you are a woman, especially a black woman. The underprivileged that are vital, the disadvantaged without a title. Here, I'm speaking on the black woman. Because going back to the beginning of this conversation, when the white female German journalist was talking to me about her feeling of disenfranchisement, her feeling that not only did she not have a real say in what was expressed on the album, but the album really just had nothing to do with her, therefore, no comment necessary. The fact that she believed that the album was more towards just black people, and that she had to talk with her friends to realize that the album is actually for everybody. Her thanking me about that put me in the position where I said to her, thank you for being so honest with me. But I have a question for you now. When you listen to this album, why did you feel this way? Because if you made an album as a woman and you were talking about the sexist things that men do to place you in the position of second-class citizens, how these men objectify you, how you have to work so much harder to get where you want to be. If you made an album about this and you went deep into it, providing historical reference and context, should I listen to this album and say, oh, this album isn't for me, therefore let me put it to the side? She said, no, you're right. And I said, art is an open forum that we share. And the concept behind the American Negro is that we are human. We are equal. And I said to her, you are a journalist. If you were a white male, would you be farther in your career right now? She said wholeheartedly yes. And she started talking to me about the ceilings that she had to deal with in being a white journalist. So I said, oh, so you are marginalized. You understand. And it was such a beautiful conversation because we were seeing eye to eye. And for clarification, when she was telling me about her feelings of alienation when it came to listening to the album, she told me that in order to tell me that she realized that it was made for her too. So I just want to put that in context. But these are the discussions I want us to have. And when it goes back to the black woman, I said to her, I said, so you are a white woman and you're feeling marginalized. You feel yourself being put into situations where you are striving to be equal. I said, now I'm going to talk to you about the concept of double oppression. Because as a woman, you already have to work harder. But what if you are a black woman? Have you thought about that? Black women have it the hardest in the world because they have to deal with double consciousness, image versus identity, but they also have to deal with this double oppression. Sometimes this double oppression is actually referred to as double or triple oppression, because this marginality also brings economic hardship. So you're a black woman that is suffering economically due to the insurmountable handicaps that place you in this position. Now, what happens when you're raising black children in Chicago that are threatened every day by their peers with guns? This is the world, and we're merely a microcosm. And this is what I'm talking about here with the American Negro. Next song I want to play to you is called A Symphony for Sahara. This is Adrian Younge, and I'm talking to you about the American Negro on Artform Radio. That song is entitled A Symphony for Sahara. What does this mean? The Saharan desert is where the Africans had to cross in order to get to the coast, in order to be sold as chattel as part of the transatlantic slave trade. Now, you must understand the importance of learning about the transatlantic slave trade because racism is derivative from slavery. Slavery is not derivative of racism. You have to understand that in the world, there's always been classism, right? There's always been separation based on religion or ethnicity. But there's never been discrimination to this degree when it comes to the social construct, the fallacy defined as race. So when I wrote A Symphony for Sahara, I wrote a symphony for the evil, the nefarious circumstances that placed my ancestors in a position that we have not fully recovered from. Did you know that before the transatlantic slave trade, about 1,000 years before it, not 100 years, about 1,000 years before it, that millions of more Africans were taken into slavery in the sub-Saharan slave trade? Did you learn about that in elementary? Did you learn about that in high school? I know you didn't learn that much about American slavery because I didn't. But the Saharan desert is a place that has seen so much evil. If I said to you that slavery still exists in the Saharan desert, would you believe me? What I'd like you to do is Google slavery, Africa, Sahara. And I want you to read about the stories of slavery. I want you to read about what black mothers, the underprivileged that are vital, what they had to deal with, what they have to deal with in the Saharan desert. So I think I want to close out with one more song here, and I want to thank y'all for listening to my message. As I often say about the American Negro, it's the most important piece of work I've done to date. And if you said to me, Adrian, I love the message, but I'm not really into the music, I'd be elated. If you said to me, conversely, brother, I love the music, but I don't really like the message, I'd be disappointed. Because the music is merely the score to the history. That's all the music is. And if you love the music, that just makes me even happier. I'm going to close out with a song entitled Rotten Roses. But before I do that, I want to read the lyrics. As I said, I know some of you, because English is not your first language, it's hard to understand when we're singing. So the lyrics are rotten roses, molded at the seed, blooming black leaves, colored as we bleed. Rotten roses, rotting as we grieve, blooming black leaves, wanting to be free. Rotten roses, molded at the seed, colored as we bleed. Thank you all so much. This is the end of, I think I'm going to call this part 1. There's more art form ready to come. It's Adrian Younge.